I do think that the justices, several of the justices, had very good, very legitimate questions about how this law would be implemented and the implications for citizens and non-citizens alike. They asked questions about, how long it takes, for example, for somebody at the local level to check with the federal government to confirm their citizenship. They were concerned about the potential for civil rights abuses, for unnecessary and prolonged detentions of citizens, for example. And I think that was definitely, they were very good signs and good signs that they had concerns, and that they were questions that they asked the state that the state couldn't respond to. And all of the states said, on the one hand, well, we don't think people are going to be detained for any longer than necessary. The federal government during the argument said, well, it could take upwards of over an hour to confirm somebody's status. So, and it's very difficult. And so I think that was one of the promising signs from the arguments. I mean, obviously, it's a very complicated piece of legislation. It's got all these different provisions. I think that they were definitely asking good questions about, it is ultimately, it's difficult to say how they're going to rule, especially because the law is so broad and it includes so many different provisions. Without a doubt, I mean, when we give local police who are untrained in the complexities of federal immigration law, when we give these local police the power to then stop and question somebody about their status, very, very bad things happen. And the biggest thing is that they end up making mistakes, they end up discriminating against people, they end up stopping people based on accent or because they look foreign, and they start relying on their own biases to make policing decisions. And so I think that's one of the biggest consequences, one of the implications, if this law does go into effect. We're going to see the discriminatory practices of Joe Arpaio. We're going to see these policies and practices expand to every single police department in the state. We know how much he's terrorized the Latino community here in Maricopa, and we obviously don't want to see that happen across the state. I think if they decide to allow some of these provisions to go into effect, one of the most dangerous provisions is Section 2B, which they spent a lot of time considering. If they allow that section to go into effect, it would mean that every police officer, anytime that officer comes in contact with an individual, they would have the authority to question somebody about their immigration status if they think that person is here, unlawfully. Well, I have not found any legitimate reason for an officer to determine reasonable suspicion that you're here, unlawfully. What they will do is rely on their own biases, and they will target people who look and sound foreign. The law would force them to make immigration enforcement a priority at the local level, which means we're going to have a lot of police officers who are spending a lot of time, energy, and resources stopping, questioning, and then detaining people who don't have their papers. So as a public safety policy, as a public safety law, it fails miserably because they're going to be focused on people who really aren't threats to public safety. I mean, look, in a state like Arizona, where we have almost 2 million Latinos in the state of Arizona, they will now be considered sort of potential criminal suspects simply because of the color of their skin. And I think that is what's so sad. That is what's un-American, and it's unfair. I mean, people like Jim Shee should not be forced to carry their passports simply because they have brown skin and because they, quote, look foreign. I mean, Jim was born in the United States, and he carries his passport everywhere. And I think that, unfortunately, what SB 1070 has done, and what it will do if it's allowed to go into effect, is it makes all of those people of color, not just Latins, I mean Asians, anyone of color, a potential criminal suspect in the eyes of the law. And I think that's what's un-American and really contrary to all of our fundamental values and belief system of treating everyone equally.